Senator MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I want to go back to the nature of these studies that Senator Housakis touched upon earlier. Ms. Paquet, I must confess, I find the rationale for the nature of this study fairly unconvincing. The Americans received a 400-page study. The U.S. Congress received a 400-page study, which they had time to analyze, amend, bring back for ratification. That study compared the old NAFTA to the new NAFTA. They didn't have a study which compared the new NAFTA to no NAFTA at all. So I find it very difficult to think that we would take a different type of approach. So I'll ask you this question. This study that we put together, was this an independent initiative of global affairs, or did the ministry or the government instruct global affairs to do a study of this nature as opposed to a comparison of the old NAFTA and the new NAFTA?
Thank you very much. So yes, it was independent. So it is actually our proposal to put to present it this way, because as I said, this is what we believe we were facing.
I don't believe we were facing that. If you look at the American study, that's not what they put on the table. The American study compared the old NAFTA to the new NAFTA. So why would we not do the same?
And the U.S. also decided to put the three different scenarios there, which, as I said before, it was the first time. And if you do it one way, you have a negative. If you do it another way, you have a positive. So it's a different approach, yes, and we believe this one is much more in line with actually what we were facing. So, yeah.
Sorry, if I can just add to that. Thank you. When we were approaching the beginning of this negotiation, before we made the decision to enter into the negotiation, before the government made that decision, we had a number of discussions with the U.S., and we were given a fairly stark choice. NAFTA would end, or we would negotiate a new NAFTA. We were not given a choice of either continuing with the existing NAFTA or negotiating a new one. It was one or the other.
Who said NAFTA would end? The Office of the President or the Congress?
Well, it was certainly the administration that gave us that message. But as I mentioned earlier, there are some differences among legal views about whether or not the president can take that action to terminate NAFTA. And there is certainly some legal advice that we have received that suggests that the U.S. president is able to do that. He can certainly initiate the 6-month process, and it's quite possible that he can complete that process. Congress, as you probably know, has given an increasing amount of power to the administration over these issues over the years. I don't know whether, Robert, you have anything to add to that particular issue or not.
So it's a very complex domestic legal situation in the United States, but the simplified view is the Congress has constitutional jurisdiction over international trade. They have delegated that power in many acts, including the original NAFTA Implementation Act, to the president, and including, for example, in 232, to give the president the power to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum. So the analysis, the conventional wisdom by most trade analysts in the United States is that the president alone has the power to withdraw from NAFTA, because the power is in the NAFTA Implementation Act of the United States that give the president power to withdraw, to chase tariffs, and to withdraw the definition of what constitutes an NAFTA country.
But none of that precludes us from doing a comparative study the same way they did. That's all.
Look, I want to reiterate that point, and I did earlier, and I think I agree with Senator MacDonald. The decision certainly in itself was flawed not to do a comparative analysis of what we had in place in order to be able to judge the New Deal. But the thing that I find more egregious than that, quite frankly, is still the fact that Global Affairs did not present an economic analysis at the tabling of this agreement in January 29. And the time was adequate, because certainly the government had precluded the deal. The negotiations were done pretty much. There was quite a lapse of time before Parliament was recalled and before the agreement was brought to the House of Commons. So I think it was, and again, we'll have the minister answer that particular question, because at the end of the day, it's the government that presents these reports to the House Committee. But I think that's a serious omission, not to be giving members of the House of Commons all their information in order to draw their conclusions. Senator